Cool stuff. Really cool stuff. I don't know who made the video this morning, but I was blown away. Awesome. Big hand for whoever made the video. Yeah. So yes, I'm Henrik. I'm from Sweden. If I look at you strangely when you speak at me in Norwegian, it's because I understand about 73% of what you're saying. The rest is so-so. But I'm learning, yeah. So I work mostly in Stockholm as some kind of a coach. I help companies change, right? Sometimes for the better. And I have this hobby as I travel to all these different places. I like to ask people the projects you've been in that actually succeeded. If you've actually seen any projects like that, why did they succeed? Right? And the projects you've been in that failed, and everybody's been in a project like that, why did it fail? And it's really interesting. It's my kind of amateur research. And what came out of this was I've added up the number of person years of experience that this represents, about 10 to 15,000 man years of experience. All kind of, yeah, so this workshop, using sticky notes and various forms of affinity grouping and things like that, I've been looking for patterns, right? What is that causes projects to succeed or fail? Really interesting stuff. And guess what? It's pretty much the same things that keep coming up, whether I'm here or whether I'm in Tehran, whether I'm in Cape Town or Tokyo or Lima, anywhere I go, it's the same things coming up. It's really fascinating. And here's a summary. Are you ready? Yeah? Have you heard that word before? Communication. User involvement. And small steps, as in not building everything at once. Is this a surprise to anybody? No? Not a big surprise? No? What's interesting is what's missing too. Nobody mentions technology. Nobody mentions like, oh, it succeeded because we chose the right platform, or it failed because we chose the wrong platform. Nobody mentions the skill of the programmers. That's a bit of a surprise, right? I guess my conclusion is that if you sort these things out, the technical stuff will sort itself out also. But if you mess up this, the tech won't help you, right? You're screwed anyway. Right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, shit. You want more? I was supposed to talk about lean or something, right? Okay, I'll continue. So, right, this is supposed to be about lean, right? And the thing is, as I help companies, right, to me, lean and agile and all these different buzzwords are just toolkits that I carry with me, kind of like the doctor carries a toolkit when you visit a patient, and then you open it up and you try to pick the right tool. It turns out that this strange word lean, which kind of means anything to anybody, there are some really useful ideas in there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Lean is really just the Western word for what in Japan is called the Toyota production system. And if you simplify it, it's really just a bunch of great insights from a car company, which they stole from another guy who probably stole it from somebody else, right? But there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But just to give an example, one of those kind of nifty ideas that are actually really useful is the idea of maximize flow, not resource utilization. Like, okay, what does that actually mean? I'm going to show you. So I need 5 volunteers to get up here on stage. I'm not going to pour cold stuff on you. I'm not going to blow things up, right? Just need 5 people to get up here on stage. Big hand, first person coming up. 4 more. Yeah. 4 people. Have you line up right over here, right? So, thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Right. Thank you. That's 2. So I need 5. So I need another 3. Yay! There's another one. Cool. And there's another one. Great. I need 5 people. Just a little demo. Cool. Big hand. We got the whole 5 people. Right? So you guys are now, you guys represent a development team, okay? And this represents a feature, and I'm like your customer. So I'm going to pass in features, and you're going to build them. And to build a feature, it has to pass through all 10 hands, right? So everybody has to pass through both your hands, pass it through the whole team. That represents everybody doing their part of the job, okay? So, and when you're done, you put it right here in production. It's right over here. This is the production, right? So go ahead, give it a shot. Just pass it on, right? Through both hands. Look at them work. Look at that. And deploy. Big hand. Give them, yeah. That's cool, right? Now we're going to make this a little bit trickier. What if I pass it to you first? How are you going to handle it now? Oh, look at that. Ah, they're pretty flexible, right? Right, cool. I'm going to give them a hairy feature now. I'm going to put it here. How are you going to handle it now? Look at that. Ooh, they're changing the architecture. Cool, big hand, right? Yeah. They're very agile, right? This time I'm gonna ask you to count how long time it takes to deliver a feature. So when I pass the ball, count seconds loud, okay? You ready? Start counting now. 1, 2, 6 seconds, okay? So now we've established a baseline, how long it takes to build a feature for this team. Cool. Now, this time I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause you in the middle, then you just freeze, okay? When I say pause, go for it. Pause. They're paused, right? So now suppose I'm the newly hired manager, right? I come in, I open the door, cool, close the door, run off to some meeting, right? And keep working, right? Pause. The manager comes back after the meeting later on in the afternoon, opens the door, looks in, runs off. What do you think the manager is thinking? Just stay paused. What is he thinking? Yeah, look at that. Look at this. We hired these expensive, skilled people, and every time I open the door, it's only one person working half time with one hand, right? It's like 10% resource utilization. Bloody waste, right? It's horrible. So I'm going to fix this. So yeah, you can continue. You can deliver this, right? So now I'm going to fix this obviously broken process, right? See? And I'm going to make sure we really use the resources efficiently. So it's the same rule as before, right? Everybody has to touch every ball for it to be counted as done. But this time I'm going to keep you guys busy. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Oh, there's an available hand. I'm looking for idle resources. I see idleness here. There's idle resources. There's a hand. Cool. Oops, don't sleep. Got a lot of work to do here, right? There we go. Work. There we work. There we go. Freeze. Pause. Pause. Okay, manager opens the door. What do I see? Problem solved, right? Look at that. All these expensive resources, they're working really hard, right? They're being busy. It's great. I fixed the problem. Perfect resource utilization, right? Except what? What the heck, right? What the heck? It says the customer. What are you guys doing, right? Oh, we're being very efficient, right? So yeah, thank you very much. You can put the balls back and have a seat. Give them a big hand. Thank you. How many of you have seen this problem in your companies? Hand up if you've seen this problem. This tendency to just keep people busy. It's very common, very, very common. In fact, I'd almost call it some kind of disease, right? So what happens when you focus on keeping people busy, you get busy people, right? But you get very slow delivery of stuff. This is best exemplified using, let's see, can I have the picture back? Yeah. You can think of this next time you're stuck in a traffic jam, right? In a perfectly resource utilized road, right? This road is perfectly utilized. There's cars on every spot, right? It's great, except that the purpose of the road is not to be perfectly utilized. The purpose is to help people get from A to B, right? That's what we mean by flow. Get stuff done, get from A to B, right? So yeah, you need slack, you need some emptiness, you need to have a culture where it's okay that people don't have something to do right now, right? It's not a major problem. That's the principle of flow is more important than resource utilization. Are you with me? Right? This is just one example of a really useful principle, but slightly counterintuitive, because it does hurt your soul as a manager just a little bit to open the door and you see, everybody's not fully busy, maybe I can give them one more project or one more task, right? So I think part of the problem is this productivity illusion, the idea that as a developer, whenever I'm not typing code, I'm wasting my time, right? I got to be typing code all the time. The problem is, I hate to say this to you because some of you might get sad, right? Nobody wants your code. Nobody wants it. Yeah, sorry. Your job is to produce as little of it as possible. Produce as little code as possible to solve the business problem. In fact, if you can solve the customer's business problem with no code, guess what? Right? No code equals no bugs, right? So yeah, resource utilization is based on this notion that more is better, but often, in fact, more is not better. But fast is normally good, though. Faster is better. So yeah, don't try to maximize output. Don't just try to pile as many rocks as possible. Instead, slow down a little bit. Take a look at what you're loading, right? Maybe you don't need to load as much stuff if you load the valuable stuff. right? So the person down at the bottom maybe has a lower velocity, right? But more value. It's the mindset, right? So lean is essentially, this is kind of, I'm intentionally simplifying it a little bit. I mean, there's like 20 or 50, or I don't know how many books on lean now, right? So, but simplifying it a little bit, it's about getting fast by reducing waste. In other words, don't get fast by running faster, right? By coding faster. You get fast by reducing the distance, right? Not by running faster, but by reducing distance. And the way you reduce distance is find out what not to do. You remove waste, get things out of the way. Don't worry, it'll get more concrete than this, right? So to me, lean and agile, they kind of, they're very similar. There's a lot of compatibility. In lean, they're like, eliminate waste, right? In agile, you go to the Agile Manifesto, it says simplicity, maximize the amount of work not done, which is eliminate waste, right? So there's a lot of compatibility. To me, these are all messed up in my head. Very compatible. And if I had to summarize it using just one phrase, it would be early delivery of business value. Very strong commonality between these two schools of thinking. They just came from different directions, right? Lean came from the car manufacturing, Agile came from a bunch of programmers, but the principles are pretty universal. So, okay, this is early delivery of business value. How do you do that, right? Two main techniques. One is short feedback loop, because the shorter the feedback loop is, the faster I can learn what business value is to this customer. Plus, the customer will get happy if I deliver things early. So yeah, short feedback loop and continuous improvement, which means spending time figuring out how to work faster and how to build a better product. Because processes and structures and organizations have to be optimized to the local context. There's no one size fits all. So you need to experiment a lot, and that's where continuous improvement come in. And these kind of fit together because the short feedback loop lets you learn faster, so you get better continuous improvement. And you can use the continuous improvement to make your feedback loop even shorter. So they fit together, right? So let's dig down this one first. Talk about, to get a short feedback loop, one way to do that is frequent releases, right? A lot of companies are stuck in some kind of vicious cycle, which looks kind of like this. Okay, 6 months, we deliver every 6 months, and we get a big bang release, and release is drama, right? Release is drama. It's difficult, it's hard, we need release coordinators, release managers, toll gates, all kinds of stuff. And because a lot of stuff happens in 6 months, if you release seldom, by definition, there's more stuff in the release, right? Which means that the release is big. And if the release is big, there's more things that can go wrong, and the consequence of things going wrong is a lot bigger as well. So release is, painful. And because release is painful, we're going to be tempted to release even more seldom. Oops, right? See the problem, right? The vicious cycle. It's a really huge problem. So you need to kind of, twist this around and say, no, wait a sec, it's not like we should release more seldom because release hurts. It's the opposite. Release is hurting because we're releasing seldom. So we should release more often. So other companies that are really good at this, for them, release is routine. Release is boring. It's not exciting at all. You don't need a lot of roles and routines around that because it happens every week, for example, right? So you release often, there's not a lot of stuff in the release, so it's quite small. So the chance that something goes wrong is smaller, and the consequence of something going wrong is not as serious, right? And in fact, worst case, you just roll back to whatever release we had last week. So, and because release is simple, you can keep doing it often. Now we're in a positive cycle. Right? So I'm curious, how many of you here in this room feel mostly like you're up here? If you had to pick one, hands up. Just curious, that's about half, yeah? And how many of you feel like you're more close to this model? You're down here. That's it, about 50-50, right? So those of you who are stuck here, go talk to somebody here and find out how the hell they did it, right? Maybe you can. So here's an example from a company that I work quite a lot with, which is Spotify. And we had this problem, our client, right? How many of you use Spotify? Most of you know what it is, great. Yeah, so this client, when we were just a few teams, we could release this thing quite easily. But as we got more and more teams, like now we have 70 teams, but as we got more and more teams, it started getting quite difficult. Like the client is never stable. There's always somebody in the middle of something. So the product is never stable enough for release. So it started getting really painful. And here's where the lean stuff comes in. We could have added roles to manage this, right? We could have added lots of roles and routines and structures and control things to manage a release process. But instead of doing that, don't manage the waste, eliminate the waste. So in this case, we had to change the architecture. A lot of work, but it was worth every minute. And now the architecture is pretty much is based on Chromium Embedded Framework, which means that the client is pretty much like a web browser in disguise, and all the teams can release stuff on their own independently, which makes a huge difference, makes it a lot easier. So that's an example of how. Another thing which has helped us a lot at Spotify, but I know a lot of companies are doing this now, is release trains. So for example, if you take the Android client, right? The release train is every 3 weeks. And we're moving down towards 2 weeks. So every 3 weeks there's a new release. And the reason is because people don't want too many releases. If we release every day, people get annoyed, right? It's like, what the heck? Spotify has been updated, you want to download it again? And the next day, Spotify has been updated, you want to download again? You get annoyed, right? So 3 weeks seems to be just about good enough. And the basic rule is the train always departs on time. So here's 3 teams, they're all in different states, right? Feature A is done, feature B is done, feature C is done, but feature D there is in progress. There's always something that's in progress, right? The rule is whatever's in the trunk gets released. So even the stuff that is in progress actually gets released to production. So the Spotify product is full of code that's not finished. And if it's not finished, all we do is hide it using a feature flag, right? So we have this feature flag. We can, in fact, in our test version, you can enable these and disable them quite easily. And what this does, it becomes like a forcing function for collaboration and early integration, right? People know that whatever code I put in there is going to go into production at the next train, so I better keep the code clean, right? So that's release trains, and it's very useful for many reasons. And one reason is it makes planning a lot easier, right? If you take the example of a train, like if the train leaves, if you're going to take a subway and the subway leaves every 5 minutes, how many of you would check the timetable before you leave to take the subway? Is anybody that stressed? I'm just curious. Right. And if the subway leaves every half hour, how many of you would check the timetable before? Yeah, most of you. It makes a big difference, right? So if the train leaves seldom, now you have planning and coordination, and if you miss the train, you get frustrated and annoyed. You got to add some buffer time. All this waste. But if it leaves very often, who cares? I'll just go there. If I miss it, take the next one. Same thing with release trains, right? A lot of the release planning friction kind of disappears when you get that to work. So that's just some examples of techniques that many companies are using. A big part of it is automation. Because if release happens often, it can't be this big manual process, right? And this is just one example now. It was actually quite a lot of work, but now I get this nightly build on my phone, which is really nice. Every day I have a new version of Spotify. It's the one that looks like a moon, right? Nightly build. There's a normal version, there's a nightly one. So that means anybody who commits code today, it's going to be in 1,500 employees' phone tomorrow, or just automatically. So they'll get early feedback based on what they're doing, right? So these are some examples of typical techniques. And the holy grail of this is, of course, continuous delivery, which is a ton of work, but it's not rocket science. You can take a book like this, you read it, you do what it says, bang, you have continuous delivery. You just got to do the work, right? And it's basically, the idea here is every commit is a release candidate. Every single commit is a release candidate. I might not actually want to put it into production, but I can if I want to, right? So releasing is just a business decision. And the guiding question is, how long does it take to deploy a change that involves only one single line of code? And preferably that answer should be minutes maybe, or seconds, not hours, days, weeks, or months, or years, or decades, or whatever it is, right? And can you do this on a reliable, repeatable basis? Those are the guiding questions. And typically how it looks like kind of once you get this working is something like I commit my code, and then ta-da, automatically it builds, and it tests it and integrated, it gets deployed to some kind of staging-like environment, all automatically without me doing anything at all. And then manual test, a little bit of manual test, because you can't automate all test. And at some point, I can just press a button, one button, click, and it's in production, right? This is the vision. So if we go back to Spotify, we've put a lot of effort into this. We're not all there yet, but some teams have actually come pretty close. And this is one team that kind of tried to take it really far. Their idea was a deployment should be so easy that even the agile coach should be able to do it, right? So to do that, they actually built a game out of it. So here's how it looks like. So what are we going to deploy? This is the Spotify API, public API. Let's deploy the metadata service. Okay, to which environment? Let's put it there, okay? Which version should we deploy? How about that one? Am I feeling lucky? Yeah, right. There goes. Done, right? That's how easy it should be. Right. So yeah, automation is a big part of it. But there's other things to it too. If you release very often and you're not getting feedback, then how do you know if you're building the right stuff? How do you know if you're delivering value? How do you learn? So you got to get user involvement as well. And a useful way of thinking of this is you want to minimize the distance between the people writing the code and the people using the code, right? The actual users, not just the customer or the project manager or all these intermediaries. And you can measure that distance. You can measure it in the number of handoffs, right? If this customer thinks my product is crap, am I going to find out from the customer, or am I going to find out from the product owner who found it out from the product manager, who found it out from customer support, who found it out from the customer, right? So how many steps in between? And ideally, it should be 0 steps. At least that's a good goal, right? But start from wherever you are now and try to gradually reduce the distance. You can also measure distance in time, right? If I put some crap in the code now, am I going to find out tomorrow, or am I going to find out next year? When am I going to find out that this was crap, right? Very useful mindset. In fact, if there's one thing that really would make a huge difference to any project, is just focus on this thing. Look at how can we reduce the distance. Seems to be one of the biggest success factors for IT projects. This is an example. A Swedish police did a project called PUST, which is actually a very interesting case because it's actually 2 projects. One that was pretty successful in 2010 and even won a prize, and the one which was an absolute bloody disaster, biggest disaster I've ever seen, right? Which was the same team building the same product again using waterfall. Like, why would they do that? Well, that's a different story. Let's talk about that later, right? But what I want to talk a little bit about is this project, because we had a lot of interesting patterns going on, and especially around user involvement, which in fact I think was one of the biggest success factors for this project. So the way that worked is there's a project, we had about 60 people, right? And there's police in the room, walking around, talking to people, having lunch with them. Very valuable, getting instant feedback. Hey, look at my screen. What do you think? Is this on the right track? It wasn't always the same guy. It was different people, but there was always somebody in the building. We had acceptance test group. Our release cycle was every 2nd month, right? Which may seem slow, but for a government project, it was actually quite fast. They had an earlier project which had 7 years to first release. Like 7 years? So it's 2 months was pretty fast, actually. So, and every 2 months, a big group of people came in, real users, to sit and hammer the system, right? Give feedback. And we had pilot users in the field in one region in Sweden called Östergötland. Real users using this product inside the cars, giving us a lot of feedback. Amazingly valuable, saves a lot of time. But of course, you don't need to actually write software to get feedback. How many of you have used paper prototyping? Just curious. Yeah, also a very powerful technique. Can save a lot of time. This was quite nifty, by the way. I don't know where this came from. I just stole the picture from online somewhere. I think you actually move that phone around to symbolize different parts of the interface. Like, pretty cool. Anyway, back to Spotify. Spotify has an approach to product development, which I find quite good. We don't always follow it to the letter, but we're guided by this. And basically, we call it think it, build it, ship it, tweak it, which is inspired by Lean Startup. And here's how it works. If you're going to build something big, right? If you're just going to do something small, then just build it. There's no process involved. Just build it, right? But if something bigger, it maybe involves forming new teams, things like that, then first formulate the problem, right? Describe what problem are we trying to solve. And then get users in the building. Do user research to find out, is this actually a problem? For example, a couple of years ago, the problem we had was people who don't know what to listen to could not use our product because you have to type the name of a song or a track, right? Or an album, otherwise, so there was no radio-like functionalities. We needed something like a radio, and we validated that through user research. And then write a narrative how would the press release sound like? If we had a product that was done today, how would that press release sound like, right? All this is done before writing any code. And we tried a bunch of different narratives or press releases using Google AdWords to kind of find out what do people get excited by. And this people got excited by. Radio you can save. Like, I can hear a cool song, and then I want to get back to it later, I can save it, right? That was a good feature. And then build a bunch of prototypes and define the metrics. If this product was done today, how would we distinguish success from failure? We could measure things like how much people listen to music, or how much they share music, or how much they log in, right? What would the data be? This is kind of like a form of test-driven development, but at the product level, right? What is the failing test? You define that from the start. And once we've done these 4 key things, which is also quite iteratively done, then okay, yes, we have a case here. We have a narrative that's exciting. We have metrics that we believe in. We have prototypes that are interesting to look at, etc. So then we have teams build the MVP, the minimum viable product. And that means build something that fulfills this narrative. Make it narrative complete, but not feature complete. Smallest possible thing that's not totally embarrassing, right? And then put it into production. Just put it out into production, but not to everybody. Just 1% of all users get his product or this feature. And then measure. So now the team that built the feature is looking at actual data on dashboards and comparing the 1% to the other 99% and checking how they behave, how they act. And then based on that feedback, they'll tweak and update and twiddle with this feature or this product. Which means that this is very iterative. Here maybe they might be doing multiple releases per day just to try new things. Until they find a way to get the desired behavior, right? Also a nice side effect here is they also learn things like operational issues like, does this scale? Do we need more memory? Do we need to optimize something? So it's a very gradual rollout. So this is the kind of Spotify approach. And since we have like 20 or million users, it's not yes, there's some user communication, but a lot of it is database. We look at how users actually behave when they use the product, right? So that's another alternative to user involvement, actually measuring what the user does in the field. Right? You can do that if you have enough users. So those are some techniques for getting short feedback loop. And I mentioned MVP, minimum viable product, is a way to get user involvement and a way to get frequent releases. So back to the police, right? How did we do there? This massive, really complicated thing that's going to integrate with everything. One of the reasons why things took 7 years before was because they tried to build the whole darn elephant, right? Instead, the key is look for ways to slice the elephant. In this case, we sliced it like this, per region. We don't need to give this to all of Sweden at once. We could give it to just one region. And we don't need to support all crime types. We can support just one crime type, right? So now instead of a massive project, it became this rather small project. Still took a year, but it was still comparatively rather small, just to support one crime type for 10 or 20 police in one region, right? All the other crime types, you have to handle the old way. So that was our version of the minimum viable product. And of course, the first release sucked, and we got feedback, and we made it better, and it sucked too, and made it better. And gradually, they started liking it, right? So we're improving it for Östergötland. And so finally, we're like, okay, now these guys actually like the product, so now let's send it to Uppsala, etc. And when they were happy with it, let's send it to the rest of Sweden. And check that works, and then start adding more features, right? So very gradual way of developing. This is critical. If you can't find a way to take your big product and split it into pieces, none of this agile lean stuff will help you, right? Here's another example of a pretty nifty way of doing an MVP. Dropbox, okay? This is, their hypothesis was pretty much something like this. Before building the product, right? This was the bet they were making. We think file sync is a problem for people, right? That's their assumption. If this assumption turns out to be wrong, their product is going to be useless, right? So it's useful to state the assumptions. This is our bet. Our product will solve the problem is also a hypothesis, right? And people will actually want to use our product. So how do we validate these assumptions in a cheap way? What they did was this. Huh? Okay, let's try again. No? Is the sound on? Okay, let's give it a shot again.
Okay, my name's Drew, and I'll be showing you a quick tour of Dropbox, which is a new way to store and share files online. What makes Dropbox different is that it just works, and there isn't any complicated setup or interface to learn. So let's get started. I've already installed Dropbox on a Windows PC and put a bunch of files in, and now I want to sync these files to my Mac. So to do that, I just installed Dropbox, and now I'm linking my Mac to my account. So in a second, my account will be linked, and you can see that the files that were on my Windows PC will start coming down. And what we're looking at is my Dropbox folder, which looks and acts like any other folder except for two things. One, these little green icons that indicate files are up to date, and two, anything in my Dropbox is synced across all of my computers and to the web. And you'll notice that when I make changes, everything syncs up pretty quickly.
So, what did you just see? You saw a video, right? And guess what? It was a fake video. They hadn't built anything. It was all fake. There was no code behind this. Pretty cool trick, right? And why would they do that? Well, because then they could put it out on the web and see what happens. And what happened was it drove hundreds of thousands of people to the website. This is the founder of Dropbox. And our beta waiting list went from 5,000 people to 75,000, literally overnight. And it totally blew us away. This is a very cheap way of validating a hypothesis, because suppose nobody had cared. They put this video up and everybody was like, meh, right? They just saved a lot of time not building a product that people don't care about. This doesn't prove the product, but it does give a clear indication that maybe this is worth proceeding with. So be a bit imaginative. You know, writing code is the most expensive way to validate a hypothesis, probably, right? Right, so let's move a little bit to the right now and talk about continuous improvement. Visualization and face-to-face communication is really key in both Agile and Lean. Doing this helps you to get a short feedback loop, but it also drives continuous improvement. And what I mean by this is pretty much, how many of you have seen these kind of boards? Yeah, I was starting to wonder if you were falling asleep after lunch, but yeah, you're kind of waking up. Let me just see, how many people can raise your hand? Just to do a bit of baselining here. Cool, 95%, that's great, yeah. So, these are very common, and people gathering around. Boards like this are useless unless that happens, right? This is when it gets interesting, conversations around the board. So we have face-to-face communication, we have visualization, very powerful. I'm going to give a more advanced example, though. This is from the police project, 60 people. We had this big monster of a board, which I'm not going to be able to go through in detail, but just high-level picture. There's the flow, right? High-level epics turn into features, they get broken into features. We decide the next 10, and then those get pulled into development, they get scrunched together into system tests, and then user acceptance test, and then release, right? This may look like waterfall, but it's not, because all these things are going on at the same time, right? So while we're system testing this stuff, then we're developing that stuff at the same time and analyzing those things, right? It's all going on in parallel. This is a Kanban system, right? A single board for 60 people. And team swim lane, so every team has a swim lane like that, right? And to make sense of their more tactical level work, each team also has their own board, right? So the card over here actually gets replicated down to there, and then it gets split into tasks. So epics turn into features, and features go over there and turn into tasks. It gives you both a high-level view and a tactical view. Does that kind of make sense? Right? It's a two-level Kanban system. Quite common. But again, the value is conversation. So every day, there's lots of daily stand-ups of various forms happening around this board. I call it the daily cocktail party, right? Lots of stuff happening. And this is where problems get solved. This is where dependencies are discovered and things like that. And just-in-time planning, like, hey, this one over here, I think we need to understand the dependencies around this. We probably need to break it down and estimate and things like that. So they run off and they do a meeting like this, right? Play some planning poker, things like that. So it becomes like a trigger for various forms of workshops. But there's other benefits of visualization. Planning, right? You look at this and you can just count how much stuff is there on a Friday, right? And just write that down over there. So you zoom in, there 4 things were there last Friday, and then 0 things the week after, then 2, and then 4. Just how many cards are done, right? Some projects might have story points and estimate these in size, but we actually didn't do that. We just counted the number of cards. We figured that it evens out over time, right? Which it usually does. So this was our velocity. Now using that, it's quite, as you see, it's quite variable, but over a 3-week period, you get a pretty stable average. So then we can do release planning. This was our burn-up chart, right? The cumulative number of features actually delivered to production, or ready for acceptance test at least. We had some problem there, which I'll show you later. But once stuff started flowing, there we see a pretty stable trend of stuff getting done. And then we can draw a pessimistic and optimistic trend line using no science at all, just using visual, just draw a line, right? and then look at the list of high-level features and go to the steering committee and say, hey, listen up, by next release, this stuff will probably all be done, right? Because that's that. And some of that will be done, but not all of it. So this is where we're uncertain. And then none of that will be done. Even if we're really fast, none of that will be done, just by looking at the history, right? It's a very useful way to get a realistic release planning. But it's also nice because then you can see, are things actually improving, right? Velocity is just a measure of output. So it's not always the best thing to measure, but it's at least something. And the fact that we can, prove that, look, our velocity has doubled, it's still give an indication that there's something we're doing right. We got the same number of people, and we're doing twice as much stuff, right? Very useful. But maybe the most important use is to spot problems, right? So turn on your EQ sensor, right? What emotions do you see here? Do they look happy? Not really, right? Yeah, not very happy. In fact, they weren't, because what they were seeing every day was that. Right? All the stuff piling up in system tests. Everybody's working really hard, nothing's getting done. That's what they were seeing every day. Really frustrating. And after a while, they got tired of it. They're like, darn it, we got to do something about this. Because look, our velocity is 0. Right? We're all working hard. It's just like the ball game, exactly like the ball game. We're all being very busy. We're all holding lots of balls, right? But nothing is getting delivered. Right? Our velocity was 0. So this triggered all kinds of stuff after a few weeks, and they decided, let's stop building new features completely and just do test automation. So this lane here was test automation and other internal tech stuff. So yeah, they started just doing test automation to eliminate lots of stupid things that were found in system tests that could have been found earlier. But the key thing was everyone started thinking about the whole thing and not just my part of the stream, right? Not just me cranking out code, it's us getting stuff done. It's a mindset shift. It took several weeks, but one thing that enabled the mindset shift was meeting in front of this board every day and feeling the pain, right? So very powerful stuff, visualization. Another thing which this triggered was introducing WIP limits, work in progress limits, which is one of the core Kanban things. So all across this board, you see these little red things here, little red text. That's WIP limits, saying that, well, at max 5 features here for any given team. You see they're already breaking it here, but but they started with 10, then they reduced it to 5. Max 10 features here in the next queue, max 10 over there, etc. Putting limits across the whole board reduces the risk that we just have too much work in progress. Very useful to think about the traffic system, right? Same thing, if you regulate the number of cars on the road, then you avoid the traffic jam situation. Okay, keep in mind that any kind of visualization like this will evolve. There's no one size fits all, you have to experiment. So this board was the result of like maybe 1 to 2 months of experimentation and going through various shapes and forms, right? So you have to experiment. With bigger projects, it gets harder. And some do electronic boards or both electronic and physical. Experiment, again. If you want to know the details of this, you can check out, I've written quite a lot about it in that book, but this was the gist of it. So that's a little bit on visualization and face-to-face communication, like really key. Cross-functional teams will tend to communicate face-to-face because they're sitting together, right? They tend to use boards like this, and by being cross-functional, they can release more often, and I'll show you why. Cross-functional, the way we want to work in order to achieve early delivery of business value is in verticals, because that's business value, right? Building one layer of the database is not business value to the customer, but building one slice like that is business value to the customer. And you can't do that effectively if your organization looks like that, right? Because look, none of these teams can actually do that. None of them can do that. They all have to collaborate together to create even one single slice. A lot of coordination, a lot of waste, right? So companies that really try to apply these principles, they have to change their structure and work more like this, feature teams, mix up the roles. So a team like that can, in fact, build a slice like that. You still need some cross-communication, but this needs to be the key unit of work, right? So this is how Spotify works. We got about 70 of these teams now spread across 5 cities. Almost just about all work at Spotify gets done in groups like this. They have their own, we've optimized the whole office for this way of working. And I've seen similar, before this I worked at Skype, similar thing there. Last week I visited Atlassian in Australia, in Sydney, and the same thing there. All over the place I see companies, the ones that are really fast, really lean, building really great stuff, they work like this. They have cross-functional teams. Small end-to-end responsibility, like maybe one team owns search, one team owns monitoring. They have some aspect of the product that they own completely. And they're cross-functional, and they're self-organizing. There's no one person who controls everybody. They're like a small startup, right? So yeah, cross-functional teams. The final point, to get continuous improvement, it's not enough to just have these things. You need to actually put some time into it, right? Allocate some time to make continuous improvement happen. So improvement circles. I don't use this word a whole lot, but I think I will use it more often, because what I mean by this is just any group of people that get together to cause improvement to happen, right? So one variant of that is the classical retrospective, right? Happens after every sprint, it's the whole team together. That's one type of improvement circle. Or a post-mortem, something went to hell, we did a release and everything blew up. Get the key people together into a room, talk about it, that's also a kind of improvement circle, right? But the focus is, what's working well, what's slowing us down, what are we gonna change, right? Those are the kind of conversations. Not whose fault is it, right? Who are we going to fire? It's just what are we going to change, what are we going to improve? It's about making problems visible, not hiding them, right? Make the problems visible. Because there's always problems, there's always stuff you can improve. And typically these result in various forms of visualization, such as, what are the top 3 impediments for this team, or for this department, or for this project, and what are we doing about it, right? It's really powerful. If you're the manager of an organization, and all parts of your organization have top 3 impediment lists. It's very, very powerful. But there's different ways, but the key thing is to make sure that these things happen. And don't just limit them to the teams, right? This is typical retrospectives, right? Every team is having their own little improvement meeting. That's great. They're solving local problems. But you almost always need, if there's some kind of dependencies, if we're in a scaling context and we're working together on something big, you need these also, right? That cut across. Whatever you call it, cross-team retrospective or whatever you want to call it. But this is people getting together like that, and also including whatever extra roles you have that are not in the teams, right? All bigger projects have this. It could be a project manager, it could be the line manager, it could be whoever it is. But there's usually other people involved that are not inside the cross-functional teams. Get them in, talk about it. Because here's the key. No matter how you organize your project, no matter how you draw the lines, right? The hard problems happen across the lines. So to organize any way you want, the hard problems happen in the gaps between, right? So that's where the improvement circles become most important. So yeah, maybe it turns out that these people have some problem communicating with each other, and there's some issues with marketing and sales, and there's friction and frustration. So okay, let's make an improvement circle out of that. Right? So now we work together to solve whatever problem we need to solve. It might just be temporary, who knows, right? So experiment a lot with improvement circles and make sure you totally disrespect any kind of organizational boundaries when you do this, right? Just ignore them, right? Just get the right people into the room and talk about the problem. Here's a really useful thing that we use a lot at Spotify, and I'm happy to see this spreading a lot to other companies now. The idea of asking yourself, what is the definition of awesome, right? So for a team, maybe, what is an awesome sprint? Or what is an awesome team? This is actually one example of one team. They put up their definition of awesome. Definition of awesome equals Niels. Okay, someone added that. Things like don't break shit in production, right? Things like having a complete set of skills in the squad. We call these squads at Spotify for some reason. Being experts on the tech stuff we use, right? This is a vision. We might never get here. That doesn't matter. It's not the point, right? The point is, if we can agree on what awesome looks like, we're more likely to be able to move towards awesome. So awesome is a direction. It's not a place, right? A couple of years ago, we talked about what is our architectural vision at Spotify, right? What would awesome architecture allow us to do if it was truly awesome? And this was just one part of it. I can build, test, and ship my feature within 1 week. From scratch. That would be awesome, right? And I use data to learn from it, and my improved version is live in week 2, right? Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, yeah, that would be really cool. But that's really hard. Can we ever achieve that? Doesn't matter, right? It's just a vision. It's just a definition of awesome. Yeah, I'm talking to myself right now, by the way. Yeah. But yeah, this is really powerful stuff. And what's interesting about this is now, 2 years later, when I showed someone at Spotify, just like a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this, and he was laughing. He's like, did we really think this was awesome? This sounds rather slow, right? So some teams at Spotify have gone way beyond this, while some teams are still struggling, so it varies, right? But it's very useful. Here's a funny example. A team is actually visualizing their awesomeness, right? So branch and build, right? What is awesome branch and build? So we have aligned core, fix aligned with core release. I can't read what it says. Here's a good one. Yeah, fast builds, test automation and builds, never time out. That would be awesome. An example of not so awesome is Team City is a slow ass bitch. That's what it says, right? And that's where they are right now, apparently. So, yeah. But visualize the problem, shamelessly visualize the problem and talk about it, and then generate actions, etc. So this became their background thing. They talked about it regularly, move those little dials, right? Pick whatever aspect that matters the most to you and visualize the awesomeness or the unawesomeness. Okay, so a bit of wrap up. This is a simplistic summary of lean and to some extent agile, early delivery of business value, as in not late delivery of crap, right? The opposite, right? And the things you can do in practice to achieve this is focus on short feedback loops. Start from wherever you are today. Try to make that feedback loop shorter, right? By having more face-to-face communication, by releasing more often, etc. And make sure you have an engine for this, right? This is an engine, which is people talking to each other and actually making changes and actually experimenting and following up on those experiments, right? And yeah, all this is just some concrete examples of how to do that. So yeah, that's it. I hope this was interesting and useful, right? Thank you.